And welcome to the February 14th regular meeting of the City of Troy Planning Commission. Copies of the agenda for tonight's meeting are available at the entrance to the room. Agendas and minutes of prior meetings are available on the city website. The meeting will be conducted in accordance with the agenda as presented or amended by the Planning Commission.
State law establishes planning commissions. This planning commission is comprised of 9 residents appointed to serve our community. Members are appointed by the mayor and confirmed by city council. Other individuals participating in the meeting include representatives of the city's planning department, city attorney's office, and the city's planning consultant, Carlisle Wortman Associates.
If you wish to address the planning commission this evening, please come forward to the lectern when recognized and clearly print your name and address on the sign-in sheet. Please begin your remarks by stating your name for the benefit of the commissioners. All remarks are to be addressed to the Planning Commission and not to anyone else in the room. If you have a cell phone or any other device that might disrupt the meeting, please either switch it to the silent mode or turn it off. At this time, I'll ask our Planning Commission Recording Secretary, Kathy Zarnecki, to conduct the roll.
Mr. Biegner? Mr. Faison?
Here.
Mr. Fox?
Here.
Mr. Hudson?
Here.
Mr. Krent?
Here.
Mr. Lambert?
Here.
Ms. Malalahali? Ms. Parakis?
Here.
Mr. Tagle?
Here.
Quorum present, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is approval of the agenda. And I want to throw it to Mr. Savenant because I believe one of the items needs to be taken off the agenda tonight.
Yeah, the petitioner for item number 6, the potential PUD, who was seeking informal feedback from the Planning Commission based on some sketches that he provided, has some personal issues, health-related, and he's unable to attend tonight, and he asked to be removed from tonight's agenda.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as amended? Mr. Fox moves. Mr. Krent seconds. Any discussion on the amended agenda? Seeing none, we're ready for the roll call.
Mr. Faison?
Yes.
Mr. Fox?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Krent?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
Ms. Parakis?
Yes.
Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next is approval of the minutes from the January 24th meeting. Before I entertain a motion to approve, there's one correction to the minutes I'd like to suggest on page 7 of the minutes for the talking about the Planning Commission annual report. It says the Kelly Services building is on Crooks Road. It's actually on Kurtz Boulevard. So if that is okay to put that as a correction of the minutes. Anyone have any other corrections? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the minutes as corrected? Yes, we'll let Mr. Faison make the motion and Mr. Fox second it. Any discussion on the amended minutes? Seeing none, ready for the roll call.
Mr. Fox?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Krent?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
Ms. Parakis?
Yes.
Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
Mr. Biegner?
Yes.
Mr. Faison?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. All right, next on the agenda is public comment for items not on the agenda. Is there anyone that would like to speak on an item that is not on tonight's agenda? Seeing no one coming to the podium, then we will move on to public preliminary site plan approval, which is a public hearing for the preliminary site plan review, file number SP 2022-0027, proposed estates at Eckford, one-family residential cluster, south side of Eckford, west of Rochester, parcels 88-20-15-252-028 and 002, 036, 037, 004, 005, section 15, currently zoned R1C, one-family residential district. And Mr. Carlisle, I guess you have the honors tonight.
Yes, thank you, and good evening, and happy Valentine's Day to those that celebrate. The item before us tonight is a proposed cluster development. It's located at the southeast corner of Tallman and Eckford. The site has 6 parcels and a total of about 7.6 acres. We know that the site is encumbered with wetlands and significant tree cover. We also know that this development is directly across Eckford from the recently approved Eckford Oaks cluster development as well. With regards to surrounding land uses and zoning, the site is surrounded by R1C one-family residential, and R1C cluster development just again to the north, as I noted. Again, single-family homes surround it. We do note that the Troy School District owns the property directly to the west with the school and some open space adjacent to it. The site, as noted, has some significant natural resources. The survey provided indicates on-site wetlands. These are primarily located on the southeast and eastern portions of the site. We note that the application does impact these on-site wetlands. We do also note the applicant did not provide a wetland delineation report or a permit review from Eagle to confirm the status of these wetlands and if and how they are regulated. As required by the cluster ordinance, the applicant did provide a parallel plan. We do note, based on the presence of those wetlands and the lack of information from Eagle, that there are 5 lots that are constructed on top of wetland portions. We find that due to the presence of those wetlands, it would require a permit from Eagle, and that may not be realistic based on the quality as well as any other conditions of those wetlands. So as such, we've excluded 5 of the lots from the parallel plan that gives them a base parallel density of 20 lots. However, we do note that based on 20 lots, the applicant is providing 35% open space, which gives them that 35% bonus. So they are eligible based on the parallel plan that they submitted up to 27 lots. However, the applicant is only seeking 26 lots. So even with the removal of those 5 lots, they still, under the cluster ordinance, if recommended by the Planning Commission to the City Council, they still can obtain the 26 lots that they're asking for. The site plan is in front of you. It includes 26 single-family lots. The smallest lot in size is 6,300 square feet, and the largest lot, the average lot size is a little bit over 7,000 square feet. We do note that the applicant is seeking 6 additional units over that 20 based on the parallel plan by providing 35% of the site as open space, preserving a significant amount of on-site wetlands, and providing a 10-foot path that provides a trail connection. I'll talk about that a little more in a second here. With regards to open space, as I noted, most of it is located along the eastern and southern portion of the site. The darker kind of green color within that open space collar is the actual wetlands that are being preserved as part of the site. And I do want to note that the open space does include those wetland areas as well as a portion of the path or trail that the applicant is providing as well. The trail is a 10-foot wide trail that runs, kind of bisects the site. It's a path that connects to, eventually connects down south here at the Daisy Night Dog Park, and then runs all the way on Livernois through the Eckford Oaks and up to the DPW site to the north. So it connects that existing bike path that the city has installed. With regards to encroachment, there is a requirement that the perimeter setbacks have to meet the adjacent zoning designation for their rear yard setback. We do note that lot 26, which is in the southern end of the site, encroaches 8 feet into the 40-foot setback along that southern property line. And we also note that the applicant is requesting relief that all of the decks they're proposing decks with all the single-family homes here, and they're encroaching into 15 feet into the 25-foot setback. So we're seeking relief on all of those lots with regards to deck encroachments. The applicant is proposing 3 home types: a colonial, which is up to 2,900 square feet, they call it a story and a half, which is another colonial at 2,500 square feet, and a ranch at 1,900 or so square feet. We do note that materials for these projects have not been provided, and they've only provided the front elevations for these proposed home sites. As the Planning Commission is well aware, there are standards which the Planning Commission is to consider the application. It includes long-term preservation and protection of natural resources, the use of innovative site design, the use of appropriate buffers and land use transitions. Is there proposed a compatible mixture of open space, landscape areas, and pedestrian amenities? Has the applicant incorporated sustainable design features? Has the applicant provided a means for common ownership of open space? Again, any density bonus should be commensurate with the benefit offered to achieve such bonus. Is the development served by central public facilities and services? And is the architectural form, scale, and massing appropriate and complementary to the surrounding area? So in summary, the applicant is seeking 6 additional units, and this is in exchange for 35% open space, additional protection of the wetlands, as well as the trail. The Planning Commission shall review the application to determine if the requirements met for cluster option and if the required standards have been met, and if the additional number of units is commensurate with the open space provided. We do want, as part of the discussion of the Planning Commission, to consider the relief of lot 26, as well as all the decks. The applicant should indicate the materials, and we do ask that the applicant provide the wetland delineation report and a permit review from Eagle. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carlisle. Any questions for Mr. Carlisle from the commission? Mr. Krantz?
A quick one again regarding the setbacks. So the homes 1 through 9 and 10 through 17, they're back to back. Is that where the decks don't meet the requirements?
So there's a building envelope, right? And there's a required 25-foot setback. And the building, based on the plan by the applicant, the building, the deck could encroach 15 feet past the building envelope, which would be 10 feet from the rear property line. So they're seeking relief from an encroachment of 15 feet into all the required 25-foot required rear yard setbacks for all units.
So it's required 25 foot and the deck makes it only 10 foot?
If this relief is granted by recommendation based on planning commission by the city council, yes.
And the setback for house number 26, is that a side setback that's not being met?
It's a side yard setback, Mr. Krantz, but by the ordinance, you're required to meet all the perimeter setbacks have to equal the rear yard of the adjacent property. So it's 40 feet because it's a rear yard, and so they're only providing 32 feet. And so they're asking for an 8-foot relief from that rear property line on the southern end of the site.
Okay, but the rear it goes.
It's their side yard, but it's a perimeter setback of the entire development. It has to be 40 feet.
Okay.
And they're asking for 32.
So the setback problem is on the south side of the building? Okay.
South side of the building, but
It's not a rear setback?
it's their side setback, but it has to meet the rear setback
Oh,
for the
that's where I was a
adjacent
little
property.
confused.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. I got it.
Yep.
Yes, Mr. Tagle?
Do you know what the setback is at the wetlands? There's a wetland setback line. Do you know what that distance is? Once the wetland is defined, once the edge of the wetland is defined, there's usually a setback line that...
Usually 25 feet.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Mr. Fox?
Apologies if I missed this from the application. The walking trails, so maintenance of that, is per the application, is that going to be like an HOA that's maintaining that, or would that become a city path that the city's going to be maintaining?
I'd have to confirm.
Okay.
I'm going off memory of numerous discussions.
Be the same as we treated the one north, right?
Yeah.
I assume there, so this path,
Yeah. If it's being incorporated.
so this path basically runs here and runs into, this is the Eckford Oaks, runs through here somewhere and then up into DPW, eventually up into here. We would treat it the same way that we treated the path that runs through Eckford Oaks. We just don't remember how that was treated if the city took it over because it's a city trail or if it's still maintained by the homeowner association, but we can find that out for you and get back to you.
That's not a problem. Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Carlisle? I just had one quick one, that the stub at the end of the street there that's planned for being built, is that primarily so like delivery vans can have space to turn around, or exactly does that stub have a purpose?
So it's called a T turnaround. There are two types of turnarounds that are accepted by the city. The one is a T, the second one is a cul-de-sac. Cul-de-sac's a little bit more larger, and so they would impede more into the wetlands. This is reviewed by the fire department. And the purpose is for multitude of reasons. One, delivery cars or vans, potentially school buses or bus that comes down, garbage truck turnaround, and public safety vehicles for their turnaround as well. So for that reason, that's why the stub is required.
Great. Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Carlisle? If not, we'll bring up the petitioner for a presentation to carry on what we've seen here and also to answer any questions from members of the commission. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for having me. My name is Jim Epping. I'm a land planner located in Clarkston, Michigan. Appreciate the opportunity to be before your commission. I'm representing tonight, again, I've been before you with Monterey Properties, and obviously a great builder in the area, so we appreciate the opportunity to be on your agenda. Thank you, Mr. Carlisle, for your detailed presentation and report. I won't go through it again in detail because I think you've heard it, but what I'd like to do is start with a couple of the questions that the commissioners had so that I can address those and give you our feedback on those, and then just hit a few more points very quickly and open it up to you for questions. In no particular order other than the way in which I wrote them down. In terms of the trail, our anticipation would be that that would be dedicated to the city. We've done some neighborhoods within Troy in the last year, and we had similar trail systems, and really what we're proud of is this ability to continue to add these puzzle pieces to the Troy trail system and help join that. So certainly we'll work with the building department, Mr. Savadant, and but it is our intention to dedicate that. If it determines that it should be done a different way, we'll certainly work together on that. The wetlands, there are wetlands to the east of the site. Those wetlands have been submitted, delineated first of all, and then that delineation has been submitted to Eagle. Eagle has reviewed that and accepted that delineation is accurate, and now we're in the permitting stage. There's going to be about 2.2 acres, just a small sliver of the wetlands that will be mitigated, and obviously that's an Eagle permit, so we're going through that permit. They have provided documentation that they're in agreement with our delineation and our size. We're going through the permitting process. Obviously, all that would be contingent. Any final approvals we would expect to be contingent on that Eagle permitting, which we'll continue to work with the city on. The setbacks, and particularly Lot 26, which is that southern setback on Tolman. The way we read the ordinance is that we are required to have a 40-foot setback, perimeter setback from the side. In almost every case, and my assumption is here, I may be misinterpreting, but in almost every case, setbacks are typically measured from a property line to the building envelope. And so what we've done is we've provided 40 feet from the property line to the building envelope of 26. So in other words, if that home was absolutely maximized onto its building envelope, we would have 40 foot to the southern boundary there. If we're interpreting that incorrectly, dimensionally, we still have that 40 foot, but it sounds like perhaps we would ask for your recommendation for that setback. But I think, once the homes are built, once neighbors are living there, the important thing, at least from a planning point of view, in my opinion, is that dimensionally that home is 40 foot from the property line. All the other perimeters are far in excess of that, 87 or so feet behind lots 22 and 23 and 24 and so forth. And then the last one, and then I'll just hit a few other points, are the decks and the patios. This is a very flat site. When we grade it, we know it'll be a flat site. In other locations throughout Troy, we've built daylight basements and walkout basements. We know that this is a flat site. We would anticipate, or do anticipate, that really all of these will be at-grade patios as opposed to decks. My understanding of your ordinance is that it really regulates elevated decks with the idea that we don't want to kind of put people up on a platform to look out into other people's yards. These are all anticipated to be at-grade patios, something like a unilock or a interlocking paver patio, which certainly is lower. And I believe, if I'm reading your ordinance correctly, that isn't even a regulated feature within an ordinance. So again, we'll work with the city and any types of documentations, those lots that back up to each other that do have that circumstance. We'd be willing to say that those will be at-grade patios or any other type of language that we would like there. Mr. Carlisle talked about the parallel plan and the density. We appreciate that calculation. We agree with it. We think if we were to maximize this site, we could get as many as 27 single-family home sites. We're proposing 26. We're excited about the trail system. Not only do we have the trail system, but we have really a tremendous amount of sidewalks just given the street frontage on the two external streets as well as the internal streets. So we'll have 6-foot sidewalks throughout, and then that 10-foot trail system that kind of weaves through the natural areas of the site. We're at 35% open space. That's about 2.7 acres. I think last time I was here, and I apologize for not doing this, we'll add to it, but we've been kind of tallying up Mondrian's total open space throughout the city of Troy. And I think last year when I was before you, we were at about over 22 acres. So we'll add nearly another 3 acres to that permanent preservation of open space throughout the city. What we know, getting to know your master plan, is we feel very strongly that this, again, meets your master plan, addresses that missing middle with the moderate-sized homes, anywhere from 1,900 square feet up. We have now offered similar housing styles in a number of neighborhoods. We're seeing a great deal of interest in the ranch homes. And so basically we've designed each of these lots to accommodate any of our home types, but based on current market conditions, we're seeing a lot of interest in ranches. So I think your master plan is starting to come to fruition by creating some of those additional housing types here in the city. So with that, we'll answer any of your questions and appreciate your time.
Thank you. Any questions? Yes, Mr. Savinant.
To clarify, Mr. Epping, so these here
Yes.
that we've interpreted as being decks are not proposed to be decks, they're proposed to be patios.
They can be either. We anticipate, because of the flat elevation, that a majority of them will be patios, and we'd be willing to stipulate that if that would, help the commission.
Well, that would eliminate the need for requesting flexibility for setbacks for decks. If these are all patios, that would eliminate that. Not for 26, not for this one, but for the issue of the encroachment of the decks inside the required setbacks.
It's not, pardon the pun, not a hill I will die on, because it's not a hill, it's very flat. But because we have the additional 87 feet of open space behind there, our hope would be to give our future homeowners flexibility or choice, that they could have either a deck that probably would be 18 or 24 inches off the ground, or a patio, because they aren't immediately adjacent to a neighboring home. But again, if that's a stipulation that the commission or the city would like to have, we know that they would work very, very well with an at-grade patio.
Any questions from the commission? Yes, Mr. Faison.
Can you reiterate the point you made on lot 26 in your interpretation of the setback?
So setbacks typically, and I may be incorrect, Mr. Carlisle or Mr. Savinant may know, setbacks are typically measured from a property line, an exterior property line, to the building envelope. So a building may be no closer than X from the property line. What we are proposing is an open space panel next to or south of lot 26, so that we have preservation of open space as well as the trail entrance. Because of that, we've got a 32-foot open space area and then an additional setback. I think right now we're measuring that setback at 7.5 feet, so I misspoke, but I think we can get all 40 feet. My point is that from the property line, the southern property line, to the edge of the building or the building envelope would, technically we're saying 39.5 feet. We could commit to 40 foot there and make that a 40-foot dimensional distance between the property line and the building wall. True, part of that is on private property on within the lot, and then part of it is within open space, but dimensionally it's that 40 feet.
I understand. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Fox.
So when looking at the cluster standards from the ordinance, item E specifically inquires about sustainable design features and techniques such as green buildings, stormwater management, best practices, and low-impact design. I guess I want to frame my question where I want to give you the opportunity to say, how do you believe that this development is meeting those standards of kind of sustainable and green development?
No, I appreciate that. I skipped over it and I had that on my list. Frankly, I think it's a very green development in terms of its design. Just the sheer nature of being able to apply for your cluster ordinance allows us to preserve 35% of the site. And it's not just preservation of, old farm field. It truly is quality environment. We've got a beautiful wetland, a healthy woodlot. It certainly, I hope it to be a benefit to the adjacent neighbors. But beyond that, again, the city, being forward-thinking in this low-impact design, is proposing a regional stormwater system for this development as well as the two recently approved developments. So you'll notice that we don't have any stormwater detention on our site. What's happening is we're working cooperatively, or propose to work cooperatively with the city Eckford Oaks, which was recently approved across the street, and then the Robertson Brothers development, which I believe was also just recently approved. Those three new neighborhoods are going to tie together, and there's going to be a regional stormwater system, just part of the DPW department just to the north. And so that becomes, I think from a regional planning point of view, a really good idea, because now we don't have little puddles all over the place. We're not taking down trees just to build a detention basin. It's being done in a more regional, sustainable fashion.
Any more questions? Yes, Ms. Parakis.
Thank you for being here.
Thanks.
Mr. Carlisle, could you put the picture up of the parallel plan? And then could you tell us, once that's up, what Eagle has said about the properties that have the wetlands on them and what you can do on each one?
Sure. Well, so Eagle has confirmed that those wetlands are as they've been delineated by our engineer. So there is no dispute of saying, hey, is that a wetland or is that not a wetland? They're also controlled wetlands, or I should say regulated wetlands by Eagle, which is why they're there. We haven't applied for, and so Eagle hasn't rendered opinion on whether or not those lots are buildable. I think if we were saying, boy, let's really maximize this under standard zoning, and we want to build each of those lots as we've drawn in the parallel plan, there is a path that we could apply to Eagle for mitigation, and we could, make that case. And ideally, there's plenty of sites within Troy as well as throughout southern Michigan where developers are able to mitigate wetland, buy wetland bank credits, and build lots like that. And therefore, we drew the parallel plan saying, hey, yes, that is within the regulations of Eagle. They'd still have to grant a permit, but it was really meant to just be a density study. What Mr. Carlisle is saying is, hey, that might be a long shot. We're not going to give them credit for those 5 lots, so let's take those off. And but then when we factor in the cluster option and the density bonuses for that 35% open space, we actually arrive at the same number. So if you want to believe our open space or our parallel plan, it works. If you want to be more conservative in the interpretation and say, hey, Eagle will never permit it, the density numbers still work. So I think it's kind of 2 demonstrations to get to the same point. But to answer your question directly, we have applied for mitigation for the 2 little pockets. We expect to get that. That would be very typical for Eagle to consider. But impacting the larger wetland system, we haven't applied for that. That's not our intent.
Okay.
That makes sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. Thank you. So the little pocket on lot 11, for example, that doesn't, that you believe can be mitigated. So really the concern would be 23, 24, 25, 9, 7, and even Mr. Carlisle didn't say 8, but 8 seems to be covered pretty.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. What we are applying to mitigate are if I start on my left-hand side, the 3 small ones moving east. So the 3 little pockets there, we have an application in being reviewed by Eagle to mitigate. Again, that would be very typical. We'll have to buy some wetland credits to do that, but the preservation of the woods in the larger wetland system is still going to be in place.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Yep, go ahead, Mr.
I
Krant.
noticed on your drawings, it appears that all the exterior surfaces, building surfaces, are either brick or stone. Is that true?
Yes. All of our architectural elevations will have brick, at least to the first floor, on all 4 sides. Above that, it'll be a combination of brick, stone, or hardy board siding, and then other architectural elements. So brick on 4 sides to the first floor, top of the first floor, and then other, really beautiful materials.
Any other questions? I just had a real quick one, and I'm not sure of this, but you're asking for the encroachments into the setbacks. If you were to reduce the sizes of your building or houses, wouldn't that be something you would need to do?
Yes, and in fact, it's a funny thing to apply for because we don't even think, in most cases, we'll get there. The nature of a building envelope is that it essentially sets up that outer perimeter that a home could be built to. Many of our home styles won't fill that entire envelope. So in the case of those rear encroachments, if you will, with the deck, typically a ranch, because a ranch is a ranch, it has a larger footprint, right? Colonials tend to be smaller. So if those were all to be colonials, that encroachment into the rear setback, instead of 15 foot, might only be 5 foot. But again, we like to provide a housing, a neighborhood that has a lot of alternatives, because we want to build to the market. So I guess to that point, Mr. Chairman, we're kind of asking for worst case.
Yeah. The only other thing I wanted to ask you was, first, kind of an observation. I love everything about this plan except for one major drawback, and that is the 9 additional driveways onto Eckford. Have you looked at any other configurations you could possibly do on the site that would reduce those number of driveways?
We have. It is tough because it's a longer stretch. There was a time when certainly, I was one of the leaders in trying to promote rear-loaded alleys and things like that, and the reality is they just are very, very difficult economically to make work when we're trying to produce an affordable, moderate-sized, mid-sized home. Things like that just kind of knock it out of the park. We do have the ability on lot number 1, perhaps, to make that a side load driveway. We chose not to because people get used to that cadence of driveways, and it made sense to not have someone come right around the corner and then have a driveway. That's also closer to the school, so we wanted to keep that road flowing pretty well. So there are different ways to look at it, but we've tried to just make sure that the distance between driveways is consistent, and that seems to be the safest.
Thank you. Any other questions from the commission? Mr. Savidant.
Going back to the issue of decks versus patios, I don't want to keep drumming on this, but it is important because if the Planning Commission ends up making a recommendation this evening, they're going to have to make a recommendation addressing that flexibility. So if I'm hearing Mr. Epping, suggested that I heard him, I believe, offer that they'd be willing to have all patios. That would eliminate the need for the flexibility on the decks. So, because if not, if you still seek the option to provide either, the Planning Commission is going to have to formally address their request for relief. And we've been involved, Mondrian, staff, Planning Commission, City Council, residents, have been involved in a number of these clusters, and where I think all the way up the chain where people get a little bit of heartburn is when we've got developers who, and I'm not suggesting clusters are a bad thing, I think they generally are preferred over by right because they provide more open space and a lot of benefits, but when there's already the benefits provided by the cluster, then the applicants seek more relief. I think that's where people tend to get heartburn. So I think it would bode well potentially for the applicant if they were to kind of offer that they'd be willing to put all patios and eliminate the need for those waivers on 26 units.
We'd be willing to do that.
You would? Okay, good. All right. Mr. Krent.
One quick question regarding that home number 26. Is what the applicant suggesting is that we can count the 40 feet from the building, or is that not working because it's the perimeter?
Well, this one's a little bit different in my mind. I don't vote, I'm not on the Planning Commission or City Council, but I understand what Mr. Epping is saying, because if that trailway wasn't there, that yard goes all the way to the south, and it's a moot point. They meet the 40 feet. But they're providing a trailway, which is a recreational benefit. So the option is lose the unit and provide the trailway, or provide the unit with the understanding that whoever potentially, if this is approved, whoever buys 26, has to live with those, that setback, buyer beware. But but part of the argument could be that this problem, if you will, this challenge, is created by the fact that they've provided a trailway which we've requested. So in my mind, this is a request for flexibility on one, which is a significantly more reasonable request than a flexibility on all 26. It's a completely different discussion again, I don't vote, but in my mind.
Very nice, thanks, appreciate that.
Any other questions from the commission? Yes, Ms. Parak.
Yeah, along these same lines then, 18 through 25, those that don't have anything behind them for the most part, to me, those you could offer a deck. It's the first 17 that, I mean, the reason you explained the ordinance, that why we regulate decks is because they look into someone's backyard, for example. But the other ones which back up to trees and open space, it seems like we could be more flexible on those.
I agree.
Mr. Hudson.
I love the concept of a cluster development. It's worked out very well for us. But when I saw this plan, I'm looking at what can be a compact, sort of uniform cluster. Jarring my conscience when I see all these deck extensions coming out from the buildings. I don't like the idea of it being flexible between a patio and a deck, and I can tell you from past experience, if we've got some people out there who have decks, and a lot of people have a patio, the Board of Zoning Appeals is going to be flooded with requests. My neighbor's got a deck, why can't I? So I would only be in favor of approving this project in a condition that there be no decks, but only patios in this cluster.
Thank you. All right, any more questions for Mr. Epping? Oh, yes, Mr. Krantz.
Just to follow up on that, I was looking at the floor plans, and it appears that the access to a patio is off the kitchen, it seems, in all of them. So that's, that's maybe a step or two down. It's not a, it's not a require. They're not like a story up in the air that would require a deck. So I would think a patio would be fine, even if the patio was stepped up a few blocks, high.
Right.
I've seen those, and those work just lovely as can be. So.
I agree with you. I think had we not had this discussion at all, a lot, probably a majority of these home buyers would build a patio because it works.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
And it's more durable usually than a wood structure.
Yeah.
I agree. I think we can go across the board with all patios, although I do agree with Ms. Parakas that the ones 18 through 25, or especially 19 through 25, it's not going to affect anybody if it was a deck, but it just seems like there's no need to put a deck there. A lovely patio would be just fine.
It makes sense to us.
Yep.
Thanks.
Right. Thank you. We're going to open the public hearing at this point in time. And normally we don't put a time limit on it because at most of our meetings we haven't had more than a couple people. So I'll leave it up to the commission if you think, I don't know how many people want to speak tonight. Does the commission want to have a time limit, or should we just let people go as long as they want? Any preferences? Well, we won't set a time limit, but if we want to make sure everyone has a chance to talk, but at the same time, we want to make sure that we have an opportunity to act on the presentation or on the petition. So we will now open the public hearing, no time limits. So the first person, anyone that wishes to approach the commission and speak now, I'm sure Mr. Kappas wants to speak, so we'll let him go first.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Anthony Kappas. I live at 501 Ackford, directly across from proposed houses 1, 2, 3, and I believe 4. Your pen does not work. Let's try this one.
think we had this problem last meeting.
I think that's still my pen, the one that works.
When we had the proposed complex right next to me, everybody in the subdivision, everybody on the street came out. Everybody gave their arguments, and it didn't really matter. You looked at council and said, well, what are we going to do? And council said, well, you know, they have owner's rights, so they can really do anything. So there's nothing that we can say that's going to change the fact that now I'm going to have 4 or 5 houses across the street from me where I had originally one. I'm going to have an incredible amount more traffic in my area, even though they say there's not going to be. The road is going to have to be paved, so all of a sudden we're going to have cut-through traffic that's ridiculous. Nobody cares. They don't care that right about lot number 18, there's an artesian well. Someplace between 17 and 18, I don't know exactly where that is, but right in that area, there's an artesian well. So for them to build on that, they have to blast that well. Where does all that water go? We already have water problems on our street. I really don't get why it's such a problem for the city to be able to say no. I understand it. We've got 26 possible tax-paying houses versus 3. The revenue is ridiculously high. Why would the city tie their hands behind their back on a situation like this if they weren't getting something out of it? And what they're getting out of it is 26 more tax-paying houses. They don't care what happens to the street. They don't care that our beautiful area has been destroyed, literally, between 2 complexes. So I'm going to congratulate Mondrian for their next complex that they're going to be building and see if I've asked 20 people, what do we have to do to stop this? So the planning department or city council can say something other than, well, you know, they have owner's rights, so we can't do anything about it. The city needs to have some type of accountability to their citizens as well as to themselves to be able to say, hey, you know what? Enough is enough. This is not good for the city. That's it. I'm not going to say anything else. Congratulations on your complex.
Next person? Yeah, come on up.
Hello, my name is Marlena Kish. I live at 585 Turber, so I'm somewhere behind 24 and 25. I took a couple notes while the gentleman was speaking. I'm sorry I did not retain the name. One of the notes is from what he was saying, that he will add to the preservation. In my mind, this is not adding to the preservation. Maybe he's saving a little bit, but it destroys the preservation of the nature. I moved to United States about 25 years ago, lived in another town, and moved to Troy about 3.5 years ago. Not only for the schools, it was for the green space. We looked for a house for 7 years. When we found this house, we bought it. We raised our kids there. I had my parents enjoying the green space, and now it's going to be gone. I have one question to the builders. You also said that there will be benefits to the adjacent neighbors. Can you please name one benefit that me as an adjacent neighbor I will have with the 26 houses behind me?
This is not a back and forth, so you just are talking to us right
So I would like to hear, maybe in the next meeting, what will be the benefit, one benefit, from the neighbors in the south? Let alone the 52 more cars with 26 houses. Our school, the Leonard School, it's packed. There's nothing to be done to extend or expand that school to make the classes more manageable for the teachers to have our kids in a better environment in schools. But we sure do add 26 more houses. It's not only the traffic, it's not only the pollution, it's not only the school buses. It's much more than that that will be affected in this neighborhood. I used to be proud that I moved to Troy. I used to recommend people, why don't you come and move to Troy? It's a beautiful area. I don't think I can say that anymore. Thank you.
Next person would like to address the commission, come on up. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Gary Blank. I'm at 655 Thurber, so a little bit further down from where Lot 25 is. And one of the concerns that I have, obviously the nature, I mean, she expressed it very well. One of the concerns that I have is from the traffic standpoint. You look at the school, you know, Leonard's pretty full. It's jam-packed with cars at obviously certain hours of the day. So much so that the cars actually park on the grass all along there because there's not enough parking. They park up and down the street as well. So at any time when you go to an event, or you go there in the morning, those cars are all the way down, will be all the way down Thurber. You can drive by at any point in time and see the ruts in the grass, and that's been a big problem. And I know that sometimes they might station a police officer out there to try to maintain that flow and to keep people off that property because it just kind of messes it up, makes it muddy. But in a case like this, you've got 26 homes, and I was led to believe, you know, a while back that there were going to be senior housing. I know on the north side there's supposed to be another 26. You're looking at 104 minimum new cars, maybe at 2 cars, and then, you know, in our neighborhood, as the kids get older, you have cars in the street because we have kids that are driving now, and maybe there's not enough room in a garage or the driveway. So at some point, you will add that as well. And if you've ever been in that area, or really at any school in Troy, and I do like the fact that these schools are put in the neighborhoods. It's you know, where the kids, some of them can walk to school. A lot of times parents walk with their kids to school. So I love that about Troy, and I love that it's a neighborhood school. I love that there's a schoolyard for kids to get together and play baseball and soccer, and those are all great things. But when you introduce this kind of traffic with these kids, that is a huge concern. So the question is, and I know there was a traffic study done, and I don't know the exact results of that, but what is going to be done about that? What is the plan to alleviate some of that traffic, especially peak times? When you look at this plan and you see people having to go out onto Tallman to make that turn, to come home from work, to go to work, to do the things that they need to do, it's already a nightmare in there. So that's one of my biggest concerns. And my second is there is some woodland there, and from this graphic here, it's hard to tell what is the buffer in the woodland between, you know, the back of those lots coming over to Thurber. Like how many feet is that? And I don't know what that is. I'm just kind of curious because that's the woodland that's going to be preserved apparently. So those are my questions. Maybe you can address that somewhere in a future meeting or whatnot. But thank you for your time.
You're welcome. We'll probably address it after all the public comments are made. Thank you. Next person who'd like to speak to the commission, come on up. Yeah, come on. Good evening.
Hi, my name is Deanna Tabor. I've lived on this one house for 45 years this month. And 515 Thurber, it's right across from the school. And we kind of liked it. My sons went to that school. They've done very well in their college years and in their, how they work. Now, having all they're showing a nature trail. I'm not a speaker, I'm not a lawyer, which is a problem now, I know, because I have all these lawyers going to be assaulting me. But that nature trail is going to be right through my kitchen and dining room, and it's not going to be safe. I mean, with all the people here, there's going to be, we're going to have people all over our lawn. There was a horse right behind us, and so everybody had to come see the horse. And that was bad enough because they just throw garbage all over our lawn and stuff. And who's going to take care of that? I mean, it's going to be a mess. But it's not going to be a nature trail. It's going to be a garbage pit. And that's because he said, well, it will go into the adjacent property, but that's just slighted over. Nobody cares, you know. It's just into my yard, into my kitchen. And I won't even have a house. We can't afford to move. We lived there 45 years. We've invested in that house, and now it's going to be gone. And it's going to be a total disaster because they plan to go into the adjacent property, and that's mine. And it's going to be totally forgotten. Leonard is a great school, but people move there for that school and pay to go there from adjacent community, but it's going to be all gone now because they just don't care. And as I said, I'm not a lawyer, and I'm sorry, but
Don't feel bad. Most of us up here aren't lawyers either, so. We have a couple, but we won't identify them. Thank you.
thank you.
Any other comments from the public like to address the commission tonight? Anyone else? Seeing no one approaching the podium, then we will close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission for either a resolution or more questions. Mr. Carlisle.
I'm just going to answer the one question about the setback distance here along the buffer. From the back of this property line to the back of these lots is 87 feet. So it's 87 feet. And then from the back of this property line, or side of this property line to this is 32 feet. So I hope that clarifies your question.
Mr. Epping, did you want to answer any of the questions that came up during the public comment portion?
If you'd like me to, Mr. Chairman, thank you, Mr. Carlisle, for answering that one. The buffer, Mr. Blanken, in terms of the trail, I may have misspoke. We certainly aren't intending to lead the trail into any adjacent property. What I meant to say is that it'll be adjoining adjacent trailheads. So the Troy trail system really is kind of the envy of most communities in this area. From my experience, it's well maintained, well policed, very safe family area. We and many other communities like to try and add to that, and so this is meant to be a spur to the existing trail system, but certainly very, very respectful of adjacent neighbors to make sure that we maintain privacy. And I think with that 32 feet at that narrow area, we'll have plenty of room to maintain the trees and add additional trees. Traffic, we're always aware of traffic and like to be cognizant of that. It sounds like all communities, traffic is growing. We know that from a traffic point of view, this neighborhood certainly will have more cars than the current woodlots have, but we believe that it's proportional to the size of the neighborhood and maybe more importantly, corresponding with your master plan. And then the last thing, and again, this is difficult in all communities, but really from a planning point of view, the way I look at it is we are not trying, as I evaluate properties, we're not trying to evaluate what is the comparison of this proposed neighborhood versus nothing. But we're really, our application is asking you to consider what is the comparison of our proposed neighborhood compared to what the existing zoning, the R1C. So the R1C, again, anticipates as many as 20 homes here. We're proposing 26, but in exchange for that, giving what we think are terrific benefits, not only for our community, but I think specifically for the adjacent neighbors, that 87 feet of buffer, the 2.7 acres of open space, all the trees, all that addition. So we think, we're excited about building this neighborhood, and we think that that's a really great trade-off that your ordinance allows us to consider 6 additional units for all that open space. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Yes, Ms.
Yeah,
Barakas.
you know what we didn't talk about, I'm not sure if I even need to address it to you, but the fact of the paving of the road. Are you going to be required to, I remember with the northern Eckford, we required them to pave the road, and I think that's part of it, isn't it? So in other words, the entire Eckford will get paved.
Yeah, it's a condition of the Eckford Oaks. They were required to pave the entire length of Eckford. There may be some cost-sharing opportunities with this development coming online, too, to pave the length of Eckford.
Okay, so, because the northern property, I think, paved it up until their entrance. And then I don't think the plan was for them to pave the whole thing. There was going to be remaining unpaved part, I thought.
I think what would happen if this were to move forward would be that this developer or the other developer would partner to pave the entirety of the gravel portion of Eckford.
And at that time that we discussed that, I remember we talked about whether we should be considering calming techniques, or I don't know if it's too premature at this point to do that, or to require it, or put a no-through traffic at the entrance to Eckford off of Rochester. I mean, I'm not sure if any of those things might help.
It's possible. One of the questions was about traffic. I can get into that if you like.
Yeah.
Just bear with me.
As you're doing that, Mr. Savanen, if I could add a response to your question, our anticipation would be that we would either share costs or pave in front of our property. So we would anticipate that improvement in front of our property. And it sounds like part of that's already going to be accomplished with the property across the street, so we'll work together with them.
Yeah, and I'm not an engineer, so I don't know the details. So it's possible that it's a partnership between this developer, the developer to the north, and the city, some type of relationship. Those are details. Those are engineering and details that I don't get involved with.
Any other questions? Yes, Mr. Krent.
What type of material is that pathway, that trail, that 10-foot wide trail going to be made out of?
We would meet your standards. I believe those are asphalt paths.
Yes.
Thanks.
Any other questions from the commission, or anyone wish to? Yes, Mr.
I can talk about
Go ahead.
traffic. So I'm not a traffic engineer. The traffic engineer is not here this evening. But this is a memo. It's not a traffic study. It's really it's more of a report, just scientifically laying out what the expected trip generation would be for this. And the way that our traffic engineer looks at traffic generated is AM peak hour and PM peak hour, or morning and afternoon peak hour. And these numbers you see are what one would expect for the hours in the morning between 7 and 9 a.m., excuse me, and also in the afternoon between 4 and 6. So these numbers here, for example, for the morning peak, for each hour between 7 and 9, we could expect 5 cars to enter this development and 17 to leave. That's per hour for the morning rush hour, totaling 22 cars, so 22 trips in and out. For the afternoon, we could, again, this is for 26 units, we can expect 18 in, 10 out, totaling 28. Total number of trips over a 24-hour period, 292, again, spread over 24 hours, 146 in, 146 out. So if, as an example, someone's at home, got to go to the store to get a loaf of bread, they get in their car, they leave, that's 1 trip, they return, that's 2 trips. That's what this, and keep in mind that these 2 streets, Tallman and Eckford, were designed to accommodate a capacity of the underlying zoning district, which is not 1-acre lots that you see, which it's at a higher density. It's been zoned, I think it was R1C since 1955. The problem, or not the problem, that's a negative word, but the challenge or the reality is that change is difficult. I've talked to Mr. Kappas numerous times over the last few months. And Eckford's an awesome street. I've driven down it many times, and people love Eckford. And the challenge for residents is people want to live on Eckford, and other people want to live on Eckford. So it's taken decades for development to happen, and it's happening now. And I think I will disagree with Mr. Kappas on one thing. Mr. Kappas indicated that no one's listening. I think Planning Commission is listening, staff's listening, council's listening. I empathize for what it's worth, but I totally understand the frustration of some of the residents.
Thank you, Mr. Sabaton. Yes, Ms. Parakis.
And Mr. Sabaton, if you could also just briefly go over, one of the things that he said that I think should be clarified is that there could just be 3 houses, and why are we approving 26? I mean, that's not the case. So, we do care, we do listen, but we're talking about the zoning which permits the 26 houses the way it is right now without us they don't even have to ask the permission. So,
yeah, I think Mr. Epping hit the nail on the head. It's, and I hear the residents. If you go down the street now and you look to the property, there's a lot of trees and there's a wetland, and there's hardly anything there. But you have to look at the development potential, the by right development potential. If they didn't pursue the cluster and they just submitted the parallel plan, basically, they could do something that's more impactful. One of the residents talked about benefits, and maybe that's not the right word, but the cluster provides just, I think, a better neighbor for the residents on Eckford and Tallman. The number of units, the density, the additional units they get is commensurate with the open space and the buffering additional that they provide. So I understand that, it's kind of a bitter pill to swallow, but you have to look at it not as a vacant piece of property, but as what it could be by right, which is shown in the parallel plan.
Any other? Yes, Mr. Fox.
Can I ask a point of clarification on the wetlands on the eastern part of the property? So if I understood it correctly, so they've been delineated. Eagle has accepted the delineation provided by the developer. Do we know definitively whether or not those are protected wetlands, meaning that development cannot happen on them, or has that question been answered at any point yet? I may have missed it, and I apologize if I did, but.
We believe that Eagle has found that they are regulated wetlands, meaning that they have jurisdiction over them. Regulated wetlands can be mitigated should Eagle allow that.
By mitigated, you mean developed, like they can.
Could be removed and relocated, could be filled. That is a process within Eagle. It is a challenging process. Sometimes they allow it, sometimes they don't. So some wetlands are non-regulated, meaning that I, as a homeowner, could fill it and really doesn't require any permit. When they get to be a certain size or when they have certain conditions or adjacent to larger streams, then they become regulated. However, really all, I shouldn't say all, Eagle oftentimes allows removal and mitigation through a process. Sometimes it's approved, sometimes it's denied. So at the end of the day, that would be Eagle's request. Our proposal is to leave all of them other than those small pockets, which typically would be permitted by Eagle. The way that'll work is we would receive a permit very specific to those areas. We would fill those, they would be inspected, and then we'd be required to buy wetland credits in a larger regional bank.
Okay, and
So just to piggyback, so there's a Wetlands Act basically for the state of Michigan, and it defines regulated wetlands. It's kind of confusing at the best of times, but basically what it says is if the wetland itself is 5 acres in area or greater, or contiguous to a lake, river, or stream, it's regulated, which means you have to go through Eagle and go through the approval process. If it's not one of those things, so if it's a pocket, like you see here, like these two little pockets, and there's no relationship, it's not connected in any way, it's not regulated. Now, what the state act says is if communities can regulate on their own non-regulated wetlands by the state, but they have to have a wetlands ordinance. Troy does not have a wetlands ordinance. So Troy does not regulate these small wetlands, and developers, if they get a site plan approval, can fill them in. That's the way it's always been until we develop a wetlands ordinance. So if this were to move forward, so ifs and buts, right? If there's a recommendation as submitted, just for argument's sake, and it goes before council and it's approved as submitted, they've got to get approvals from Eagle to do what they say they want to do. If Eagle says no and does not allow them to fill or to mitigate, they can't do this. They got to come back. So that's kind of the protection for the city, is if that's the stop here. If they don't get approval, they come back or they lose units.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Mr. Fox.
So then I guess to follow up on that question, so what we're, or maybe one of the items that we're voting on is specifically the cluster that would preserve the wetlands on the eastern side.
Most of the wetlands, they're proposed, yeah.
Wetland on the eastern side. So then the way that I'm interpreting that is that if we denied this proposal and the developer did hypothetically end up going with the alternate plan, then we are basically gambling that Eagle would protect those wetlands. If we hypothetically support the cluster, that guarantees that the wetlands are protected. That's the city via the cluster guaranteeing that those wetlands will not be removed.
Yeah, there's different ways, and Mr. Epping is probably knows this better than I do. He's a registered landscape architect, but you can mitigate on site. So you fill some wetlands over here, but you create some wetlands over there. So you kind of balance the wetlands, if you will. And sometimes it's a 1.5 to 1, but you can do it on site, or you can do it on the site close by in the area. You can mitigate, or Eagle has a program where you can purchase wetland preservation credits in the region. So you basically stroke a check, and there's wetlands in an area that you buy and you kind of bank somewhere else. That's another approach. So there's different options available. So in theory, Eagle could, in theory, allow for a developer to fill the whole wetlands in here and possibly acquire preservation credits elsewhere, theoretically.
But there's no guarantee.
There's no guarantee.
I guess what I'm saying is, like, there's no certainty one way or the other once Eagle gets involved.
There's no certainty that this is going to get approved either.
Exactly.
Because the way this development works in Troy and in other communities, to be fair, is we don't require the developer to do all the engineering and all these details up front, because if they could do all these details up front and not get approved, and they've spent tens of thousands of dollars without knowing. So the way it works is the Plan Commission recommends, goes to City Council with the understanding that all these details, important details, but these engineering details will get worked out down the road. If they don't get approved for this, then they've got to fix it. They got to come back with something else.
Okay. So then I guess based on the answers to the questions, thank you very much. I appreciate that. I have two thoughts. My first thought is, I think one of the benefits that I'm seeing to this cluster is kind of it's adding certainty where uncertainty doesn't necessarily exist in regards to those wetlands. I think what is important to know, and admittedly, I haven't been here for past Planning Commission meetings. This is my third meeting overall. It's one of those things that I don't know what was specifically said in terms of by right, but what that effectively means is just in the society we live in, where people have private property, this developer does ultimately have rights that they are allowed to exercise, and they are allowed to build this however they want, hypothetically. What the city and what the Planning Commission is able to do is that we're able to kind of slip in rules to get more for the community out of that development. And I think that's ultimately what this cluster arrangement is meant to be, is that there is more, the city can't get 100% what it wants, the developer can't get 100% what it wants, and this process is kind of negotiating where they can meet in the middle. So for that reason, I mean, to me, the cluster seems like a great way to make sure that we're preserving those wetlands, admittedly. my other thought that I had, and this is kind of from my personal experience, I am a very relatively new homeowner. I purchased my home in January of 2022. And I will say that was following like probably a good amount of time of just looking. And that is, you know, I have a master's degree. My wife also is working full time. You know, we are young professionals. We have, I like to think, decent jobs. And still, finding a house in the market in Southeast Michigan right now, particularly in Troy, was incredibly difficult. I remember being in high school some 7, 8 years ago, or probably over 10 years ago now, geez. And they were saying there's a housing shortage. There's a housing crisis in Southeast Michigan. There has been for long as I can remember. Ultimately, houses do need to be built. They have to be built somewhere, or else people like me and my wife, we're not going to be able to live anywhere in Troy. And I think at the end of the day, developments like this are important because they do provide new people the chance to have access to schools like Leonard, to school districts like Troy schools here. So overall, I'm decently in favor of this development as it stands. I just figured with the amount of people from the public that were here, it's kind of owed that we state our opinions and why we're feeling the way that we are. So.
Did you want to offer a resolution then, reflecting your comments?
Yeah, I did have a question about the resolution. Was a patio versus deck decision officially made there?
I think we want to include that in the resolution, so.
So then let me get to the proposed resolution.
I think it's on page 25.
Yep. I would like to move, the Planning Commission hereby recommends to the City Council that the proposed Estates of Eckford site condominium, one-family residential cluster, 26 units / lots, south side of Eckford, west of Rochester, parcels 88-200-028-028-036-037-004-005, section 15, approximately 7.56 acres in size, currently zoned R1C, one-family residential district, be approved for the following reasons. The cluster better protects the site's natural resources than if the site were not developed as a cluster. The cluster development protects the adjacent properties. The cluster development better protects the adjacent properties than if the site were not developed as a cluster. The cluster development is compatible with adjacent properties. The site can be adequately served with municipal water and sewer. The cluster development preserves 35% open space to remain open space in perpetuity. And number 6 would be the site will offer only patios and not provide an option for decks.
And does he also need to include the part about the one, is it property 26?
As a design consideration with the following, perhaps it's your motion, but perhaps with the following design consideration: 1, that Unit 26 be afforded the flexibility of the setback words, 8-foot encroachment into the required perimeter setback.
Okay. Is that okay as part of your
Do I
resolution?
have to repeat it exactly?
No,
Okay.
we could, as long as the secretary gets it, so. All right, is there a second to the motion?
Okay.
Mr. Faison seconds it. Any discussion on the resolution? The only thing I just wanted to reiterate what I said. I love the fact there's a trail through there that connects the trails. I love the fact that we're preserving green space, but once again, I'm concerned about the number of driveways going onto Eckford. I know Mondrian can do a great job on design, but hopefully when it goes to City Council, you may look at some modification to reduce the number of driveways onto Eckford. So, Mr.
Look at that.
Biegner.
And just so you guys know, we all live in Troy as well. I've lived here for 27 years. I've lived on 2 different trailways. I've not had the issue with the garbage. I love living in Troy, and I'm planning on living in Troy for a long time. So it's always tricky because we look at it as residents as well as the bigger picture of it. So I hope you guys understand that.
Any other discussion? Mr. Krent?
Yeah, just piggybacking on the comment about the trails. There have been quite a few studies on the benefits of a trail, And I remember when I served on the Parks and Rec Board, there were studies done across the country, and they said the closer the home is to a trail, the higher the value of the house. I think it was, if you're adjacent to it, your price of your home was 15% higher than the other homes in the neighborhood. If you were whatever, how many feet away from it, you would get at least a 10% increase in your property value. So being a member for 19 years on the Troy Parks and Rec and member of the Troy Trails Committee, I'm well-versed in all of the benefits of a trail, and cities like Rochester Hills has a fabulous trail system. Other cities do, and the residents really appreciate it, and I'm really grateful that we're incorporating a trail in this subdivision.
Any other comments? Just two things I wanted to answer also that came up during public comments. One is the schools issue that always comes up. We have a letter from the school superintendent from Troy who says, don't be concerned about adding more homes into the district. We can handle the number of students. That's his opinion. You know, we can't contradict what he says. And the other is tax benefits. You know, I don't think anyone on Planning Commission is getting any benefits from increased taxes. I can't speak for anyone else in the city, but that's not something that we are considering at all in our decision making. So with that, we are ready for the roll call.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Krent?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
No?
Ms. Parekis?
Yes.
Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
Mr. Biegner?
Yes.
Mr. Faison?
Yes.
Mr. Fox?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Goes on to City Council for their final decision making, and I'm sure the notice will go out to the public when that occurs at that hearing, won't it, Mr. Seven?
Yeah, it'll go to everyone who lives within 300 feet, and there'll be a notice in the paper. I don't have a date yet.
Okay.
I've got that's determined by the city manager.
Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate your time.
All right. Next, we are on to item number 7. That is let me look it up here as I expand the screen on my computer. All right, this is a preliminary site plan review, SPJPLN 2022-0008, proposed the Westington 2 south of Wattles, east of Crooks, which is 870 Bearline Drive, pin 88-20-21-101-009, section 21, currently zoned NN Neighborhood Node I District. Mr. Carlisle.
Yes.
It's up to you now.
Thank you. This is Westington Phase 2. Planning Commission should be somewhat well-versed in this project. It's been before you a couple times. Just for background, the site is approximately 1.2 acres in area. It's the second phase for to the associated Westington multifamily project. Phase 1 is currently under construction, and the site is located at Wattles and Crooks, right behind the 7-Eleven and the office building just south of the 7-Eleven. Just for site context, the yellow outline is the under construction Phase 1 of Westington. Phase 2 in discussion tonight is that red one that is kind of behind it into the east of Phase 1. And Hills West is the project that was approved by the Planning Commission at the previous meeting, and that's the development adjacent to on Crooks. Now this is kind of flipped where Wattles is now on the left-hand side, which would be the north side. But just for context, Westington Phase 1 includes those 3 buildings that have arrows pointing to them in some fashion. Phase 2 of Westington is that darker block, and then the proposed or now approved Hills West development again is adjacent to Crooks. The applicant itself tonight is seeking approval of a 16-unit multifamily building. The building is 2.5 stories in height. The architect tonight interprets it as 2 stories in height. Either way, it meets the height requirements. The building is located on the southwest portion of the existing site with parking and circulation drives to the north, south, and east of the building, and it complies with all the form-based district requirements. I do want to note that the Planning Commission last reviewed this project over a year ago at the 2022 meeting. There was a lot of discussion on traffic and site plan, circulation, tree mitigation, open space, et cetera. After discussion of that at that meeting, the Planning Commission ended up recommending to deny the project, or move to deny the project on a vote of 8-0. The reason was the Planning Commission found it did not provide the required tree mitigation. Open space failed to meet the zoning ordinance requirements. The site design standards were not met, and the project failed to meet the transition requirement of the zoning ordinance. I just want to highlight the changes from the previous submittal to this submittal. The previous submittal actually had 2 buildings, each with 15 units, and totaled 28,000 square feet. This has been combined to 1 building of approximately 20,000 square feet. They've reduced the number of units from 30 units to 16 units. They've removed the parking and reconfigured the drive aisle along the north side of the building. They provided 9 additional guest parking spaces. They've preserved 24 trees on site, and this is an increase from 6 from the previous plan. They've decreased the overall lot coverage, or building coverage, by over 3%. They've increased the overall open space by 7%, and they decreased the lot coverage by 5%. The site does have natural features. It does include a floodplain, an existing 100-year floodplain located at the northwest corner of the site. That also is a floodplain that runs also as part of Phase 1. The applicant proposes to continue a retaining wall that was approved as part of the construction of Phase 1 onto this site as well. However, the final determination of that floodplain and the wall itself will be determined by the engineering as part of final engineering. We do note the applicant, again, has increased the amount of woodland protection from 6 trees to 24 trees, and as such, there's no tree mitigation, additional tree mitigation required as part of the development. The applicant provided a traffic study for Phase 1, Phase 2, and Hills West. That traffic study was based on 162 units. Based on the changes to the site plan, the actual number of units is 147, so it's 15 units less than what was reviewed as part of the traffic study. The applicant's conclusion based on their traffic study from their expert was the result of the study indicate that the addition of the site generated traffic, all the study intersection approaches and delays will continue to operate in a manner similar to existing conditions with minor additional delays. Therefore, no mitigation measures are recommended to accommodate the generated traffic. That review was reviewed by OHM, the city's traffic consultant, who the review is in your packet, and their conclusion is they recommend approval of the traffic improvement study. While there are a few corrections and changes that could be made for the report, they are minor. It would not impact the conclusions of the TIS. These are the proposed elevations to the project. We do note that the proposed elevations of Phase 2 are significantly different than the approved architecture of Phase 1. Phase 1 was French country. I don't know what else how else to call it, with a mansard roof. This is more of an English-style farmhouse tile development. This development is much, in terms of architecture, is much more similar to the previously approved Hills West project, which is adjacent to it. These are side or front elevations. This is a rendering of the proposed park the applicants added, and those are the trees that are preserved. This is the site in context. So Crooks and Waddles, this is the 7-Eleven, this is the apartment building. This is the approved Hills West. These are the buildings of the Phase 1 of Westington, and this is Phase 2 in the corner. Again, you can just even see in the context the difference in architecture proposed for the 2 different types of developments in Phase 1 and Phase 2. There are review standards the Planning Commission should consider. This includes Section 5.06, which is the design standards, and then also Section 8.06, which is the site plan review standards. So as part of deliberation, the Planning Commission shall discuss compliance with the design standards and compliance with the site plan review standards. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carlisle. Any questions for Mr. Carlisle? Ms. Barakis.
Yeah, can you put that slide right there? Like, this is Crooks, and I don't see the correct cut into the Hills West.
Yeah, it's not shown on this, but it would be essentially, well, the Planning Commission at the last meeting, I'm not sure it was a requirement or a recommendation that they move or work with the road commission to move it adjacent to this building rather than the middle between the two buildings. If it was moved and adjacent, it would be a straight shot up and into Phase 2. If it were not approved and it stayed in its location, proposed location, it would be in the middle between these two buildings and then have to jog to south and then over. The curb cut is not shown in this sketch.
And did the applicant provide any renderings to show the full site access and circulation so we could see how the site has access onto Crooks?
I don't believe so. This is the best, no, I don't believe so.
Okay. And then I showed on, I think, page 79 of the agenda, there were deficient 2 bike spaces. Is that still correct?
Yes, unless they're going to propose to put it inside the building somehow, there's no bike spaces provided on site.
Okay, and then I don't know why I can't, what I just did, but on that same page, here it is. Shoot. I might keep touching the screen. You see how it says there's combined 238 spaces? I'm talking now about the required parking, and then if you drop down to total, it goes to 218. I'm just trying to figure out if it's overparked based on this.
Yeah, I believe it's overparked by 20 spaces. I think there's 218 are required, and this is for Phase 1 and Phase 2 together. They're providing 238 spaces, so it's 20 spaces parked over.
But for just what we're looking at today, which is...
They're providing 9 guest spaces, so they're required to have 32.
Okay.
They're providing 41 for just Phase 2 accommodation.
Got it. So it's like 9 guests.
9 guest spaces.
Okay. Okay, that's all my questions for right now. Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Carlisle? Seeing none, we'll have the applicant come up and address the commission. Welcome back.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Thank you.
My name is Peter Stuhlreier, Design House Architecture, 3300 Auburn Road. I'm here with the development team and here to answer any questions. I can address some of the questions that have already been asked, but I'd like to summarize a couple of things before I get there. Let's see, I've got to finish this. Okay. The Ben's summary was good and covered all of the items, and I just want to reiterate the things that have changed since January last year. The building is smaller. The building is no longer 2.5 stories, it's 2. 16 units from 20. We think it's parked just right. Again, all of the open space was increased, and there was a cluster of trees that you could see in that one rendering, kind of a sad rendering, but a cluster of trees that are saved. So we went from 6 or 9 saved trees to 24. So I think that was a big deal. We want to keep in mind that we're somewhere between, I don't have the best glasses or the biggest drawings, but we're somewhere between 70 and 100 feet from the property lines behind us. So it's quite a ways, a lot of buffer on the back. And the civil engineer's here to answer and get into detail about this, but yes, we did apply to move the access point with RCOC. So that application is underway. We'll get a review and continue. Civil can get more into that if we want to talk about it more. The bike rack was probably an oversight. We have no problem. We love bike racks. We're talking about 2. We'll install a bike rack. And there are master site plans in your files somewhere, because I know we look at them all the time with Hills West and Phase 1 and Phase 2 to see how it all works. I don't know if Ben or Brent could pull one up if we need to look at that, but I know you have them. I mean, we've had that back and forth a few times on that. But with that, yes, this architecture is more reflective of the Hills West a little bit. Less the Second Empire mansard. This has to do with discussions we've had about height and about story count and everything else. And minus the dormers and the half a floor on the top of Hills West, this is very, very similar. Same brick, same limestone, same windows, same roofing. So there is relationship here. It's not a third architecture. It's just two. So with that, I can answer any questions.
Questions? Yes, Ms. Parakis.
Would you consider calling it Hills East to make it match?
You know, I think it's probably just going on the tax rolls like that. I don't know what the naming means.
I noticed in the, I think it's page 96, where you have the tree count, there's some trees where you added the 9 guest parking, parallel parking spots, and then it looks to me, from what I can tell, there's some sort of a buffer, like a green buffer, I would assume, and there's a ton of trees being taken out. Is it because they're not quality trees, or?
My landscape architect is in Texas tonight for a planning commission.
Okay.
So I can't answer that, but if they were valid trees, if they were healthy or the correct species, they'd have been saved. I can tell you that.
Okay.
That was the mandate.
Any more? Mr. Faison.
So you talked a little bit about the design of this building versus maybe the Phase 1, but I didn't quite hear everything you said. So could you reiterate that? Because I was just trying to understand the difference between the first phase and this phase, because this building is so close to that first phase.
Okay, so if I get into deep architectural philosophy, this is kind of English manner, a little bit of Eliel Saarinen kind of modern, along with the Hills West. And that's kind of this vibe. The other one is more of a French, well defined by Ben. I call it a Second Empire, even though it's not quite tall enough. But the Second Empire was a move made in Paris to reduce the number of stories, to be honest with you, to show that the roof was not a story, and it was really story. Because the Queen said you couldn't build to her height, and she had 5, and you could only have 4, so you put a roof on funny. So, but they're both kind of European eclectic architecture, but they fit into the kind of transitional styling between single family and commercial is what our thoughts are.
So is this building not as tall as the Phase 1 buildings? Correct.
It is not as tall as Phase 1 buildings, that is correct.
So that was a drive. Okay, thank you.
Any more questions? Yes, Mr. Fox.
I just wanted to confirm, because I remember last time you were here, I asked about recycling. So I just wanted to follow that question through to this phase as well. Is the intention to offer recycling pickup to renters here?
Recycling will be alongside the waste removal.
Thank you very much. That is always good to hear.
Any other questions? I just wanted to double check. You said we can add the 2 bicycle parking spots in.
We'll go through administration with that.
All right.
Find a great place for it.
Great. Any further questions? Seeing none, we don't have a public hearing, but if there's any member of the public that would like to speak to the commission on this proposal, you're welcome to come forward at this time. Seeing no one approaching, I guess we'll bring it back to the commission for further questions or a resolution.
I have a
Yes.
question or comment about the traffic. And I think maybe we have a traffic consultant here who's available to answer.
It's the applicant's traffic consultant. She's a civil engineer.
Oh, all right, I get it. Okay,
But she wrote the traffic impact study that was reviewed by our consultant.
okay. Well, okay, so basically it goes along with the question that was asked 2 weeks ago, and I believe it was Mr. Tagle who asked it about traffic, for example, heading north on Crooks, and whether if somebody wanted to take a left into we're talking, I guess, Hills West at that point, but whether there would be a backup of cars. And what I noticed anecdotally from traveling on Crooks daily, that the backup happens not necessarily on that middle lane, but on on Crooks, waiting at the light to go north on Crooks past Waddles. So then it would prohibit people or become a problem turning in. So, you know, I would want to get a response from the traffic consultant on what they think of that. And also, I think that I personally feel that I'd like to wait to see what the Road Commission for Oakland County says about moving that entrance back, because this is just more traffic entering into this development closer to Waddles.
Did you want to ask the traffic consultant for the applicant?
If she'd like to comment, that'd be great.
In one response to that, I'm not sure, are we coupling? I mean, this is coupled with Westington too. Are we going to couple the Hills West entry point, whether it moves or not, to the second phase of Westington 2, or Westington? That's just a question on there.
Sorry, I was going through. Julie Kroll, Fleece and Vanden Rank.
Don't write your whole company name,
I
it'll take
won't.
too long.
I won't. I'll deal with that. I was just looking through, and I think this question came up last time. There was a question about the potential for northbound queues to block the driveway. The northbound queue is highest, I'm looking at my queuing reports, are highest in the PM peak hour, with the northbound queue at Crooks and Waddles at 143 feet. That's not even going to get close to where that driveway is. So, and then was a question about the southbound left turn in, the conflicting left turn, southbound left turn in, 34 feet. So 25 feet is the length of a vehicle. So about a car and a half.
But heading north, I'm not talking about the middle lane, I'm talking about the first two lanes.
Yep.
That's only 74 feet, which is
So
three cars.
so the northbound left turn is 143 feet, northbound through lanes, 123, 117 feet respectively, and then northbound right turn lane was 113 feet. So just about 5 to 6 cars. So that.
At peak time?
Yes, ma'am.
I drive through there probably 10 times a day. I mean, at 8:30 in the morning, there were about 8 cars waiting at the light. That's what that's my concern. And this is before we have anyone living there right now.
So this was a future analysis that we performed that was reviewed by the consultant that they did review. Even so, the distance between the intersection and this proposed site driveway is much farther away, so we're not seeing any blocking of the proposed site driveway from the intersection at Crooks and Waddles.
Okay, thanks.
Any questions? Yes, Mr. Tagle.
I wanted to ask Julie, is the left turn lane going to be extended southbound for people heading southbound that want to turn left into the new driveway? I mean, are they going to make a left turn from the left lane of the through traffic?
Hang on.
I mean, it already exists there.
There's a center left turn lane that runs the length of
Crooks.
Crooks adjacent to the property.
And the drive you were talking about, the new drive you were talking about, what position was it at? Was it between the buildings or south of the south building?
So that is yet to be determined by the road commission. So they've submitted an application for a driveway permit, and that's under review right now. So
And the application submitted showed the drive where?
I would ask the site civil, where'd you guys put the drive? As shown in the site plan?
On the south.
Next to Berry Lane? They moved it. Adjacent, as recommended by planning commission, they moved it to the south, adjacent to Berry Lane. So that has been submitted to the road commission for review.
Thank you.
Just to be clear, your dimensions were based on the other drive. So
Correct. Ours were based on the dimensions of the driveway in the middle. Regardless, the distance was adequate for either location.
Thank you. Any further questions for the traffic consultant? All right, thank you. Any further questions from anyone on the commission, or somebody want to float a resolution? Mr. Krentz putting his glasses
I
on,
guess
like he's
I'll
going to do it, so.
Sure. Resolve that preliminary site plan approval pursuant to Article 8 of the zoning ordinance as requested for the proposed the Westington 2 16-unit apartment development south of Waddles, east of Crooks, Section 21, currently zoned NN Neighborhood Node I, District be granted.
Subject to the one requirement
Oh,
of
yes,
the
two-
bicycles.
Yes, thank you, Fred. Subject to including a bicycle rack that will hold 2 bicycles.
Is there a second to the motion? Mr. Fox seconds it. Any discussion?
I guess I just want to throw out there that in general, it is always appreciated when we can look at a development that isn't talking about knocking down new trees, if they're preserving trees that are already existing on the site. I know we just looked at the previous development that unfortunately involved a lot of trees being chopped down for the sites that were being built. It's nice with the neighborhood nodes kind of in general, how they can kind of be redeveloped as opposed to destroying more green space to build new structures, so.
Great, thank you. Any more comments? Mr. Krent.
I just want to thank the architect for, I think, a very excellent solution, especially when you compare it with the prior one. I appreciate your work.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? I would just kind of echo Mr. Krent's comments and Mr. Fox's as well. I appreciate you increasing the number of trees being saved on the site and also reducing the size of the building. It makes it a better transition to the residents to the east and south.
Thank you.
Yes, Ms. Parakis.
I'd also like to thank you for echo those same comments. I do think that is largely improved. I personally would like to postpone it. I know there's a motion on the floor, but I'm not going to approve it. You know, I'm going to vote against it because I'd like to wait to see what the road commission says. But that's my reason.
Seeing no further discussion, we're ready for the roll call.
Mr. Krent?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
Ms. Parakis?
No.
Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
Mr. Biegner?
Yes.
Mr. Faison?
Yes.
Mr. Fox?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
All right, congratulations. We move on to the next item is for public comment for items on the agenda. Anyone from the public that would like to address the commission for items on the agenda? Seeing none, you're welcome. We'll move on to planning commission comment, and we'll start with Mr. Carlisle tonight. Okay, Mr. Savinet? Ms. Dufresne?
I actually do have a comment. I didn't talk all night. Mr. Lambert, Chairman Lambert, you submitted to Mr. Savinon and myself some proposed revisions to the bylaws. I just wanted to open that up. I'd like to do it one time. So if there are other people who have some recommendations to revise the bylaws, if you want to send those to me and Brent, that would be great. I think your suggestions were good, but I'd love to hear from everybody else.
And once you receive all those, I'd like to talk to you because I had one concern with a conflict with my proposed bylaw changes, so.
I think I noticed that. but
Yeah, so,
certainly.
okay, all right.
Does everyone have a copy of it? Would you like us to send? We'll send a Word document
Yes,
to
do
everybody.
that, yeah. Great, thank you. Mr. Tagle?
Nothing tonight.
Mr. Krent? Ms. Parakis? Mr. Faison? Mr. Hudson? Mr. Biegner?
Happy Valentine's Day.
Oh, why, thank you.
Sweet. I am actually going to ask a question.
Sure.
Really quick. I guess I just wanted to float by the other planning commissioners. I know that since I've joined you guys all on the commission, I've asked a lot of questions as they relate to sustainability. And a couple of commissioners have very rightfully pointed out that not every sustainability solution works. You can't slap a solar panel on every building. You can't have, everything run off of wind power. So I was wondering what the Planning Commission's thoughts are. Is there a way that we could potentially explore sustainability and what the Planning Commission could in theory look into? Because we want to find solutions that are viable for both developers, but then also we're getting that net benefit for the city of Troy. Is that something, I guess I'm not sure what avenues we could use to pursue that, but is that something that we, I guess, could pursue? I guess this could be a question to Brent, but.
Well, I know that City Council is also talking about sustainability, and I think it's a fair question and a reasonable question. But I think it's important that the planning commission be on the same page as the city council, because we can come up with a laundry list of provisions to the zoning ordinance, but if city council isn't on board, then, there's a pretty good likelihood it's not going to get approved. So let me talk to the city manager and see where they're at, and I can get back to you.
No, that's super helpful.
Maybe this is the opportunity for a joint meeting to talk about it with city council.
Do we have one on our meeting schedule?
Yeah, so I'll mention this to the city manager, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, that's appreciated. Thank you.
Thanks for bringing that up. Mr. Faison.
That's a follow-up point. I think that's a good point and be a good conversation. But I was curious, Brent, is your thought that would be an additional requirement for development, or would there potentially be a trade-off, right? If a project has sustainable features, then there might be some flexibility for the...
What I'm hearing is, as I took it, was potential zoning ordinance amendments to bolster our requirements. But there's also some things that we do and some provisions that we have that we don't really trumpet enough, like parking lot island trees, although we've been lenient in the past of bike racks, but requiring bike racks, our sustainable development with the cluster option, woodland protection. There's
thinking of woodland and cluster where it's a trade-off.
Land bank parking, shared parking.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is probably, other than marijuana, topic number one that most communities are looking at right now, honestly. And there's a lot of ways to approach this. There's the carrot and there's a stick. So I think if this does have legs and moves forward based on consensus from council and from city management, we'd want to take a multi-tiered approach, which would be both incentivizing where we can and requiring where we can. And so I think it would be a multi-phased or multi-tiered approach that looks at all avenues of development. So it wouldn't be just a one solution fits all for this. So, and there's a lot of different options that the community can end up, the planning commission can end up choosing to move forward with this.
Just to piggyback, a great point. If I were to ask everyone in this room, what's sustainability? We're all going to have a different definition. What sustainable elements would you like to see? You're all going to have different ideas. So I think it's important to include council and the planning commission and come up with a plan to plan, or a plan to address this. Plan to plan, yeah.
I appreciate, I definitely appreciate the need for nuance. That's one of those things that there isn't really a solution that works for everything. I just think it's important to bring it up in kind of a formal, public, structured conversation as opposed to having it just be people showing up at public comments and meetings, et cetera. I think having some kind of formal joint meeting between the council and planning commission or anything of the sort would just be very helpful, because there's a lot of nuance and there's a lot to figure out. And I think that's the best way to try to figure it out, is to get those conversations rolling.
Thank you.
For sure. Thank you.
Ms. Zarnecki, anything you'd like to share? Okay. The only thing I wanted to add is, I think most of us were on planning commission when the Turtle Woods development was approved. Well, this coming Thursday, Oakland County Parks is hosting an open house at Evanswood Church. I think it's from like 4 to 7 p.m. For the remaining property to the north, I guess that's going to be turned into a Oakland County nature preserve. So if you'd like to give some input or see what they're planning there, 4 o'clock to 7 o'clock at Evanswood on Square Lake this Thursday. So with that, we are adjourned.